Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Goshen Township Board of Supervisors January 16, 2018 meeting. Would you all please rise for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Folks, we'd like to announce to everyone, please silence all cell phones and other devices. Also, just a notice to everyone, audience members may be audio or video recorded. We do have our own video recording here. This is a public meeting, so everyone just be aware of that. And you could also be recorded by third parties or audio taped by third parties. Okay, I'd like to turn over the meeting to our solicitor for the update on the case that we have with Sunoco Logistics.
Thank you. To update the proceedings with Sunoco since the last board meeting, at that time there was a petition pending before the commission, the Public Utility Commission, to dissolve the injunction that we had obtained for the township. The commission decided that petition at its December 21st, 2017 meeting and decided to discontinue the injunction because Sunoco represented that it's not installing the valve that was the subject of the injunction. The commission issued an order on January 9th making that decision effective, so that discontinued the injunction that was in place. We are now preparing a petition asking the commission to reconsider that decision or allow us to appeal it to the courts so that we can have a portion of the injunction put back in place. At the same time, we are preparing for the case to go to trial. The first portion of testimony is scheduled to be submitted by February 1st, after which Sunoco will have an opportunity to respond to that testimony with testimony of their own by March 1st, and then there will be hearings in front of the administrative law judge hearing the case in April, and then a decision would be rendered on the underlying complaint within the few months after those hearings. So the case is proceeding and coming to a point where a decision will be rendered by the commission.
Any questions, folks? Mr. Casey?
Tom Casey, West Goshen Township. Sorry, I just found out some news. It's a little shaken about one of our friends from committee. Regarding the Sunoco case, Sunoco argued on behalf of their engineering team that this, and we had negotiated the placement of this valve. It was deemed to be a necessity for the project. They've simply removed that. What, if anything, is the remedy to force this safety valve issue with regards to not only petitioning the commission to demand it, because let's be clear, in all reality, this valve, no matter what happens with the project, is a necessity, because the lack of a valve along the run, the longer you have, the more impact the catastrophic event is. So what are we doing with regards to forcing that issue, that they adhere to the requirements and or what they agreed to in the settlement by placing that valve where they originally said they would? Because I've been reading through everything, and they were very clear it was necessary, and then all of a sudden it's not, simply to dismiss us. So what are we doing on that front?
I think as Mr. Fisher just stated, we are filing a petition for reconsideration and possibly an interlocutory appeal because we feel the same way, what you just said. Our feeling is that the valve is something we negotiated for, and it's something that is greatly needed for the safety of our residents. So that's what we're doing at this point. We'll see where that goes, and we'll have to reevaluate depending on the outcome of that. But we have to take that step. That's the step that we must legally take. We can't go outside of that process. So we're doing everything that's possible as far as appealing that decision.
Okay. May I ask a question regarding the particulars of the agreement? Specifically, I'm curious to know, I've had some discussions about this already. We all know that the agreement prevents us, or the board, from supporting in any way, shape, or form any action and or protest or support in any way towards citizens and other things, as long as ME1 and all that is in place. And that's part of the problem with that settlement. My question is, I am now involved with Senator Dinnerman's initiative. He's put together a task force to do a risk analysis, and I'm chairing that risk analysis committee. So I want to know, and I want to put it to the board and to your office, what, if anything, the township can do with regards to helping, or not helping, see, I gotta reword it now, to look into the impacts of any project within this community, because we have more coming. There's a new one that was just applied for at FERC. They're reversing a flow on an 18-inch line that runs through Hershey's Mill. So we have these problems. So I wanted to know, and just for consideration for the board to look into or let me know in some way. So.
I just have a question.
If you could please stand and, oh, I'm so sorry. Your name?
My name is Inga Wallen, and I'm a citizen of West Goshen. We have all these little trinkets that stop here and stop there. They're restoring water here, and they're restoring pumps there, or stopping pumps there. Is there any way that they can be declassified from being a public utility? But that has to go to Harrisburg. That's really the core of the whole thing. So we can get rid of them. Is
I would
that
have to defer to council on that question.
Yeah, that issue has been decided numerous times by courts across the state, confirming their status as a public utility. So at this point, there's really, not that I'm not aware of any process by which that could be taken away with them. The process that's being followed is that the Department of Environmental Protection is enforcing compliance with their permits, and they're doing more now than they were a couple months ago to enforce those permits, which is why the work is stopped right now, pursuant to their order on January 3rd. So, but as far as pulling their public utility status, the courts have addressed that on numerous occasions, and unfortunately for the residents, confirmed that they have that status.
What about the responsibility of Pennsylvania to maintain the safety of citizens and the explosions that the record of Sunoco's record of having this explosion more than any other oil company?
Yeah, that's actually within the same jurisdiction of the Department of Environmental Protection, different than what we're dealing with before the Public Utility Commission.
Okay.
But that is their task, is to enforce that.
Is anything being done about that?
About the safety component?
Yeah.
Mark, perhaps you could speak to the latest injunction that has been in place. Fortunately, unfortunately, our injunction was lifted. But before that went into effect with a written order, another injunction statewide took effect. So the pipeline drilling has essentially stopped, have reports, for example, in East Goshen, that they've actually taken their equipment out. We don't know how long that injunction will last. Some indications are that it'll be a couple of months. We don't know for sure. So it's very fortunate, and the timing was great that that happened for us. That's not going to stop us from filing our reconsideration petition and also, if necessary, an interlocutory appeal. We haven't taken that off the table. We're considering that. That's where we're at now. So it's two different issues, but that was based on the DEP action because of those spills, drilling where they weren't supposed to be drilling, and they knew they weren't supposed to be, and they were caught. The DEP finally stepped in and said, that's it, we're shutting it down. And there's certain criteria that Sunoco will have to meet before they can start drilling again. Is that a fair assessment?
That's accurate, right. So it was sort of a culmination of the many failures over the last year that led to an order on January 3rd after a few more violations where the Department of Environmental Protection finally shut down the whole project and issued an order that requires Sunoco to submit numerous reports over different periods of time in the next month or so in order to get authority to start the work again. So that's right now the status of the work statewide is that it's completely stopped. So that sort of filled the gap for our injunction being discontinued. And in the meantime, we're seeking relief to try to get our injunction put back in place.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Judith Mills, and I'm
Jada, could you please step forward? Sorry. Thank you.
I'm sorry, your name again?
My name is Judith Mills.
Judith Mills.
I'm a West Goshen Township resident. Welcome, Mary and Robin. I just wonder if anyone has spoken with Curtin and Hefner about about enforcing the local zoning safety ordinances. Has that been done? Has anybody?
Our solicitor's been in constant contact with them over the past year.
At least.
When was the last time?
Last time we spoke with Curtin and Hefner, another gentleman, David Bruman from my office, is the one who has spoken with Curtin and Hefner. I'm not sure of the last time that he spoke with them, but we've communicated with them about the zoning matters numerous times.
Well, I knew that you had, but I didn't know when last.
Yeah.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Kurt Wise with West Goshen Township. I'm just wondering, has there been any kind of financial incentive to restrict or prevent the pipeline from any more violations? Or can they just go ahead and do it anyway and tough, you know? Has there been any inquiry into that?
You mean fines against
Yes,
Sunoco?
well, fines, any kind of financial punishment for misrepresenting what they were doing, drilling in the wrong place, accidents.
And you mean by the Commonwealth issuing fines or imposing
I'm
fines?
game to hear it from anyone who might be affected and therefore make them liable for the damages or misrepresentations that they do, whether it's the Commonwealth or the townships or the county or anything of that sort.
Well, I'm not aware of the Commonwealth having imposed fines yet, but they still have the ability to do that through the Department of Environmental Protection, and typically that would happen later in the process. And I'm not aware of fines by the township, but I'm not sure that we would have the ability to do that in the circumstances that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a settlement agreement, trying to enforce a settlement agreement, not spills. We haven't had, thankfully, any of those here. So,
Perhaps Rick, you could speak to that about how when Janik 2 was deforested and soil erosion permits and everything. I mean, we only have certain jurisdiction, and they did go on Janik 2 property and clear it out without following through. So in that case, we could go within, the township code and enforce what we can. But as far as, fines that you traditionally hear about in the news or something, we really don't have that power at all, unfortunately. We have to work within the code. But hopefully the DEP will step up, we'll see. As to the question about the different movements that are out there, the risk analysis, Tom, that you mentioned, and some other initiatives, there's something coming from East Goshen. I believe Marty Shane, one of the township supervisors out there, put together a letter that was published in the Daily Local. Some of you folks might have read that, where he's asking for a resolution. It's my understanding that that is something that we can do, not that we are precluded from. Gotten some, is that correct, Mark?
Yes.
And so we're looking into those options. There's several resolutions that are out there. There are several initiatives that are out there that we can go forward legally without worrying about violating our contract. What we can't do with our contract with Sunoco is bring up safety complaints outside of the parameters of what the agreement says we can do. And that's something that was a question, but we've gotten some clear advice on that going forward. So we do look forward to some of those resolutions, and we're going to discuss those further and hopefully take some action on them soon. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are these resolutions that would be sponsored by the township, or coming from the township, or where would they be coming from? I did not see Mr. Shane's letter in the day.
Oh, yeah, there would be resolutions or different than ordinances. There's something that would come from the township. We could have
Okay.
joint resolutions with different townships joining in together separately. But they're resolutions from the township, essentially. It would be signed
And
by.
the county does not participate in that?
No, I don't necessarily, no, I don't think so. I mean, I guess they could do their own resolution if they so
That's right.
choose.
Okay. And I also would like to welcome Robin and Mary.
Thank you. And your name, ma'am?
Oh, Bobby Lewis.
Bobby Lewis? Okay. We just have to take minutes, that's
Yep.
fine. Okay. Mr. Friedman? Yes, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Eric Friedman. I live in Thornbury Township, Delaware County. Thanks for letting me speak for a minute. I'll be brief. With respect to the valve location, I think there's a reasonable question whether siting an above-ground block valve right next to the area's main fire station makes sense. I know that wasn't the original agreement. There could be a question about whether siting it on the other side of 202 is a reasonable location, but as I've commented before, it was intended as a safety device, regardless of whether it serves that purpose or not. And the fact that the PUC accepted the arbitrary elimination of what was clearly intended as a safety feature without any evaluation of its effect on safety one way or the other concerns me. It shows perhaps that the PUC is structurally incapable of evaluating safety considerations, maybe because of their dual mandate to both promote and regulate the industry. So I'm concerned that the PUC is ineffective in that regard. The West Goshen does have its own report that was done by Accufax and Rick Kuprowitz. There are two reports actually, one for Mariner East 2, and in my reading of that report, it specifically relies on that valve being present in West Goshen, not only for West Goshen's safety of West Goshen residents, but also the residents of other municipalities. And I am interested, I'm not asking any questions of the board here, but I'm curious what effect the proposed elimination of that valve has on the Kuprowitz report, particularly the second one. I'm wondering whether it doesn't in fact invalidate it entirely. With respect to the DEP and its temporary permit suspension, it occurs to me that there's actually a mountain of evidence that the permits were issued contrary to the statutes of Pennsylvania in the first place. And the violations of state law and permit conditions began almost immediately after work started in February of last year. And so it's no great surprise that these things happened, given that, in fact, they were well predicted in advance. The effects on drinking water supplies, the spills of drilling fluid were predicted ahead of time. In fact, they happened in spades. One organization stopped counting at 100 spills of drilling fluid because there really wasn't much point in continuing. The same company in Ohio 2 days ago, as you know, they've had the same problems drilling in Ohio with the Rover pipeline. and they had stopped work for a period of time in Ohio and then restarted and immediately had a large drilling fluid spill 2 days ago in Ohio. So I'm wondering whether the DEP is also unable to operate in a way that actually protects the health, safety, and welfare of Pennsylvanians, along with the PUC. The good news, I think, Mr. Chairman, is that in a Commonwealth, the municipalities are uniquely situated with enormous authority to look after the residents in their township. And I think West Goshen is particularly well situated in respect to the fact that you have a pipeline zoning ordinance that was adopted in 2014, specifically for the purpose of regulating where pipelines could go and regulating the setbacks, how close they could be constructed to dwelling units and senior living facilities and perhaps firehouses as well. So I think West Goshen is uniquely situated. I respectfully encourage West Goshen to consider enforcing its ordinance given the failures of the other agencies of the Commonwealth to protect the residents. And beyond the ordinance, West Goshen is also fortunate to operate its own law enforcement agency. So not every township has that advantage, but you certainly do here in West Goshen. I know they do a wonderful job. I think that's an asset that the township has. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freed. Yes, sir.
Hi, Sam Rubin, Food and Water Action. I normally refrain from speaking at these events. I don't view it as my place, but I just wanted to correct something that Mark said earlier when he said that the DEP responded to illegal drilling by doing this. And what really prompted me to say that come up and say that's not true is that two of the reasons why that is not true are currently sitting on this board, and that's Ms. Lesota and Ms. Stuntebeck. And really, we should look at their election as well as elections of candidates in David Shuey in East Goshen, Teresa Santalucia in West Whiteland, and Mamie Bauman and Bill Miller in Euclid Township, and the massive citizens effort behind them that influenced the governor to push the DEP to take this action. And we actually have some really strong timeline evidence of that. The governor reached out for a meeting with citizens 2 days after that election was won in your favor, and then issued the ban on new HDD drilling 2 weeks after that meeting in accordance with a citizen's timeline. So I just wanted to make sure that credit is due to Ms. Lesota and Ms. Stuntebeck for making that happen and not the goodwill of the DEP.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Mr. Richardson, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now we go to the next item on the agenda, the reports for the month of December 2017. Chief Gleason, sir, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Good evening. Look at, sorry. Okay, for the month, I'm going to give a month end and also a year end. For the month of December, the West Goshen Police Department responded to 1,754 calls for service. For the year, we handled 25,062 calls for service. In December, we handled 77 alarms, 3 of which were valid. For the year, we handled 811 alarms. For the month of December, we investigated 36 reportable motor vehicle accidents, and for the year, 323. And for the month of December, we logged 20,279 miles on our patrol vehicles. For the year, we logged 273,086 miles on our patrol vehicles. In addition, other locations, selective enforcement was active on Falcon Lane, Grove Road, North Five Points Road, Spruce Avenue, Ellis Lane, and Airport Road. And our career development continues. We had our monthly emergency response team training, our monthly honor guard training. Officer Jason McGee attended a 3-day course on Gracie Instructor Certification, which is a self-defense certification. The command staff and Detective Sergeant Sedlak attended a year-end legal review put on through PSATs, and we finished up our officers with our range qualifications. I do have 2 announcements, if you will permit me. Although the paperwork and the flyers are not out yet, but Skate-A-Rama is tentatively scheduled for April 15th. And I'll elaborate more on that in February. I just got the date on Friday. And on March 24th, I'm sure most of you remember, 3 years ago, Sergeant Richard Geiger passed away from glioblastoma. And since then, the association has hosted a 5K and a 1 mile fun run in order to, number one, raise awareness to brain cancer, number two, to help the family with scholarship issues regarding their children. We have the 3rd annual fun run to Remember Richie at the VFW. It is scheduled for Saturday, March 24th. In years past, we have teamed up with the Brad Kaminsky Foundation. This year, we have teamed up with the Darren Dalton Foundation. So I would anticipate that this might be a little bigger than we're prepared. I'm just joking when I say that, but they have been speaking with this, the officers, Lieutenant Dominio and Officer Mike Meredith are spearheading this. They've been talking with the CEO of the foundation, and they are completely on board with it and offering sponsorships and so forth. I have placed packets back there at the back of the room, so anyone here that may be interested, at least if nothing else, to pass the word about it, we would appreciate it. And the flyers are on there, and it'll be put up on our Facebook page and our website shortly. So, okay, I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Chief. And now for our Fire Marshal's report, Fire Marshal Andrea Testa. Good evening, Andrea.
Good evening. For the month of December, there were a total of 21 inspections, 11 commercial use and occupancy, 1 fire blocking, 1 sprinkler, 1 paint booth, 1 fire alarm, 2 walk-through, 1 underground fire line, 1 kitchen hood, and 2 fire extinguisher placements. There were 5 fire calls, 4 automatic fire alarms, and 1 appliance fire. I attended 2 meetings, and I also attended an 8-hour training session. For the year, there were a total of 401 inspections, 78 fire calls, 1 civilian fire injury, 1 firefighter injury, and our yearly building fire loss was $988,625, and our yearly contents fire loss was $310,500. Good Fellowship Ambulance had 82 calls for the month and 1,138 for the year in West Goshen. Goshen Fire Company had 17 calls for the month and 173 calls for the year. And Westchester Fire Department had 18 calls for the month and 269 fire calls for the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is our building officials report. Building official John Beswick. Good evening, John. How you doing?
For the month of December, there was a total of 56 permits, 11 building, 11 electrical, 5 fire protection, 10 HVAC, 3 plumbing, 4 roofing, 4 zoning, and 6 use and occupancies, 1 ENS, and 1 road occupancy. The estimated cost of construction was $25,295,012.19, and the permit fees were $236,322.20. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Board of Supervisor announcements. I'll start with you, Mary. The announcements? I have a quick one. Next Tuesday, we have a comprehensive plan task force meeting. The public is invited to attend every, I believe it's 5 years? 10 years, every 10 years. You should have an updated comprehensive plan, and that's something that's slightly overdue, so we're actually working on that now. The plan is to actually send out a survey. Some of the questions that the task force has come up with thus far, they want input from the community. The comprehensive plan is sort of like a framework, where we go into the future as a township. What sort of initiatives should we be looking at? What sort of development should we be planning for? So I'll ask you to just take a look at your mailboxes. They should be coming out, I think.
End of February.
Yeah, end of February. And please fill them out, send them back in, because your feedback's going to count. So you can have a direct impact on where and what you would like to see the township doing going into the future. That's my announcement. Mr. Meekum.
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Purnell.
I'd like to note with sadness the passing of Bishop's Lodge. Some people know it as Boyd's house on Phoenix Oakland.
Next item on the agenda, township manager's announcements.
I have nothing to announce.
Next, we'll get into the township engineer stormwater announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing to report this evening.
Thank you, sir. Any zoning announcements, Mr. Webb?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The zoning hearing board will hold a reorganization meeting on February 8th here at 7 p.m., which that meeting may actually turn into a business meeting as well, because I had a meeting with Westchester School District about some signs over there. Public clerk, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Next on the agenda, number 10, approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for December 13th, 2017 and January 2nd, 2018?
I should.
Second?
A second.
All those in favor? Aye. Whoops. I see a question. Sorry about that. Dr. White.
West Goshen Township, the meeting for September 18th, could that be changed? That falls on Yom Kippur evening?
Absolutely. I thought we were going to hit that on other business, but we can address that now if everyone's okay with that.
Discretion of the board, come up with a date and circulate it.
Yeah. So it falls on Yom Kippur, and I, for one, would like to see that changed at one meeting. Should we make a motion for that, or would we?
Can't be the following Tuesday to do a comp plan, about the following Thursday, the 27th. Yes. Well, the comp plan will be either, or we move it either to the 20th or the 27th. Not Thursday, so that will be called.
Dates, what are the dates?
The meeting is originally scheduled for September 18th, so I would suggest the following Thursday,
Oh,
the
okay.
20th or the 27th.
Okay.
Because we have, well, the 18th is the, we have parking records. Well, we could move that next week.
We've done that.
We have done that, so we can move it Wednesday.
So it looks like
Dr.
September
White,
20th.
the 19th, that Wednesday. I'm not sure how the calendar falls for the holiday, so.
Well, it goes from sundown to sundown.
Right, okay.
Okay, so that's
So
what
that
we
would be
have
the
on our
20th
calendar.
or later. So that would be the 20th at the earliest.
Okay. Folks, can you check your calendars on the 20th and you just see what there's opening? I'm open on the 20th.
Yeah, I'm okay.
You, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
All those in
Chairman.
favor
I'm
of,
sorry, I didn't see it. Made a motion.
I'm going to make it now.
Chris.
All those in favor, well, let's have a motion to change the
I'll
meeting.
make the motion.
I'll second it. Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Is that just the change in the meeting date, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so to re-advertise, post the door in advance.
Mrs. Swart. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Margie Swart. No comments on January 2nd meeting minutes, as I did not get the chance to read them, so no comments on that. But on the December 13th minutes, page 2 says that the board unanimously approved the meeting minutes of November 8th with the various changes requested by Margie Swart. I did look at the posted November 8th minutes online, and no changes were made.
I haven't made those changes yet.
Okay.
I'll make those changes as soon as I can.
Okay, so would you kindly consider just postponing your vote on approving these minutes, since that is an inaccurate statement? And also, I had made comments and questions regarding the deferred retirement option program and the police contract, and those comments or questions are not reflected at all in the minutes. So maybe I could send.
Well, all right, so let's, we have several options here.
Okay.
If we could approve it with your amendments, or we could hold off on approving December 18th.
Well, I don't want to write the amendment. I just think that the recording secretary should include those comments or questions, so he needs to amend the minutes to reflect
Sure.
what I said.
I mean, we don't take verbatim minutes.
Understood.
Right, but it's just not reflected at all that I made comments or questions regarding those two separate issues that were voted on. And I would just like, I mean, even if it says Margie Swart asked comments and had questions, I'm fine with that, but that's just not reflected anywhere.
So Margie, I think what we'll do is we'll approve the minutes with those revisions specifically that you're mentioning.
To come.
Thank you, Mr. Purnell. Second to that motion?
Second, I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
Okay, and then just one request while I'm here. Would the board consider moving agenda item 14 before agenda item 12 and 13, just in case any of the traffic improvements discussions or any of those traffic improvements around the...
No, it's a list provided by the police department.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with.
I can explain that when it comes to
Yeah,
the truck.
no,
okay.
it has nothing to do with any of the.
Just improving current, stop sign intersections with better visibility, and those kinds of things.
Great, thank you.
Housekeeping.
Thank you, Mrs. Swart. Any other questions? Number 11 on the agenda is the approval of Treasurer's Report dated December 31st, 2017 for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Purnell.
I'll second that.
You have a second? You have a comment, Mrs. Swart?
Just one quick question, probably for Ms. Denham if she's here. or
She
maybe-
is out sick tonight.
Okay, building permits on page 1 under general fund. It shows that we received $305,000 in December, and I'm just curious what all those...
Chester County Hospital is the majority of that,
Okay.
and that was listed by Mr. Cheswick. Majority of that was Chester County Hospital.
Okay,
For the
were
expansion.
any building permits issued to the development at Greystone?
They haven't reported their final subdivision plan, so no.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Swart. Any other questions? I believe we have a motion and a second motion, so all those in favor? Aye. Okay, number 12. Sure.
Just like
We're
a
gonna
5-minute recess, we can get Colleen set up for the court reporting.
Folks, there's going to be a 5-minute recess where I need the court reporter to be set up. To establish a neighborhood improvement district in West Goshen Township in conjunction with the Woodlands at Greystone Residential Subdivision Project. And over to Mr. Colorado.
Just for the record, we have Colleen here taking a transcript of the proceedings. Please speak slowly. Do not crosstalk. We will stop the proceedings because she has to record this correctly and accurately. During any public comment, please come up to the microphone and make those comments clearly to Ms. Primer. And again, please prohibit any crosstalk.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have a couple of exhibits to make part of the record. Initially, Board Exhibit 1 is a copy of the proof of publication of the proposed ordinance, which was published in the Daily Local News on January 8, 2018. Board Exhibit 2 is a copy of the proposed ordinance with an exhibit which is titled Woodlands at Greystone Neighborhood Improvement District. The ordinance, as indicated by the proof, has been properly advertised for your consideration. I believe the board is aware that this is an ordinance which would establish the Woodlands at Greystone Neighborhood Improvement District. The board held a hearing on this proposal on November 8th of last year to receive comments on the proposed district. No comments were received and no objections were lodged by the owners of the properties that are subject of the Neighborhood Improvement District. I think, as the board knows, this is something that's authorized by a state statute, which is known as the Neighborhood Improvement District Act, coincidentally. And it's really within the board's discretion whether to enact this or not. The project has gone through a long history, which I think the board is aware of. The project has obtained final subdivision and land development approval, and I believe Mr. Calabrega would speak more to other permits that have been issued relative to the project. Essentially, what is being proposed is a way to finance the public improvements for the project, which have a substantial benefit to the township, including a connector road between Pottstown Pike and Phoenixville Pike, a large park and open space area, 6 miles of public trail, and some other improvements that would be open to the public, including the residents of West Goshen Township. So unless there's something else I can provide to the board, I think Mr. Calabrese is here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Estes, for that. And thank you for your firm vetting this through. I'm sure you're going to get some questions from the crowd about that, about how do you feel about the ordinance from a legal perspective as you're trying the township, how that may affect the township, good or bad.
I'd be happy to provide whatever advice I can.
Thank you, I appreciate that greatly. Mr. Calabrese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lou Calabrese and Ken Ledger, representing the applicant. It seeks to put this property within a neighborhood improvement district. As Mr. Estes said, he articulated what we believe are the benefits of doing so at the public hearing. I won't reiterate that. Mostly, we're here tonight to answer any questions that the board may have that it didn't have. Certain members weren't even on the board when we had the hearing. So if there are questions from the board or questions that we can shed some light on, we'd be happy to do that. But I think Mr. Estes teed it up procedurally very properly.
And I believe we also have our bond counsel here tonight to answer any questions regarding any possible bond issues. So if folks have any questions regarding that, feel free. I'll first start with the Board of Supervisors. If there are any questions that they may have, especially the two that are newly elected, because this is the first look for them in some ways, but they've had it under due diligence and studying up on this.
I have a question, and I'd like to see if Ben could come to the microphone. It'd be helpful for me to understand, and I'm sure many of the residents would like to understand your role in assisting the township in this regarding it.
Yes, my name is Ben Reed, from the firm of Beck & Siemens. I was engaged to represent the township to essentially review the work of the NID team, bond counsel, Attorney Luttinger, to review the statute, make sure the ordinance and all documents prepared in connection with enactment of a NID ordinance and authorization of the NIDMA is done properly, and I've been doing that thus far.
Could you spell your last name for me, please?
R-I-E-D.
So you've used two acronyms. Can you just, for the audience sake, explain what the NID stands for and the NIDMA stands for?
NID refers to a Neighborhood Improvement District. NIDMA refers to a Neighborhood Improvement District Management Association.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Reed, is it in your opinion that everything was done in accordance with the law?
That is my opinion.
Thanks. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Purnell.
If I can make a comment, I was pleased to see Section 6 in the ordinance, which specifically mentioned that the township was not deemed in any way obligated under these laws.
Is that correct, Mr. Reed?
That is correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Estes?
That is correct. The bonds are secured by a special assessment that is levied against the properties that are within the neighborhood improvement district. The full faith and credit of the township is not pledged in association with the bond, and none of the assets of the township are subject to the bond being collected if there's a default.
Did everyone hear that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Don't use your microphone.
I have a pretty loud voice, so I usually don't need that. Did everybody hear that?
I think someone's shaking their head in the back there.
The bonds would be secured by a special assessment in the nature of a tax assessment, which is only assessed and chargeable to the properties that are in the neighborhood improvement district. The The township is not obligated and will not pledge the full faith and credit of the township as security for these bonds, nor will the general fund or any other assets of the township act as security for these bonds.
Any questions from the audience? Mrs. Swart. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Margie, M-A-R-G-I-E, Swart, S-W-A-R-T, West Goshen. I emailed the board a list of questions this morning, and I hope we can just go over some of the answers to my questions for the record. My first question was, what is the rate of the special assessment? That's referred to in the actual ordinance.
Well, should I try the answer? I'm sorry. The rate of the assessment is not actually in the ordinance, but the ordinance, as I indicated earlier, would have the effect of approving a NID, or Neighborhood Improvement District plan for the development. And that plan has a rather detailed methodology of imposing the assessments, and those assessments vary depending on the type of residential unit. The assessment for a single-family detached dwelling is the highest. Well, I think it's an estate home is the highest, and then it varies depending on the dwelling type. Obviously, a townhouse would pay less money than a single-family detached dwelling. That's all set out in the plan. Initially, the owners of the property as it exists today, or the proposed developer, would pay those assessments as the owners of the property. Then once the development proceeds and individual homeowners become owners, they would then be responsible for the assessment, and that proportional amount would then be deducted from the assessment on the Jarakian family or the developer, depending on who owns the property.
Thank you. Would it be a fair statement to say if the board moves to approve this ordinance tonight, they are approving a rate, or they are approving an ordinance not knowing the rate that will be paid for by the eventual homeowners?
That would not be correct. As I tried to state, the plan, and I can't put my finger on it easily, but the plan has a rather detailed methodology and schedule of assessments against the property. And it's basically enough to pay the debt service on the bond or bonds.
May I also add something? Ken Luttinger. Just to clarify a couple of points, it's not the Board of Supervisors who are imposing the assessments.
Correct.
The ordinance provides that the NIDMA, the Neighborhood Improvement District Management Association, will be the ones imposing the assessments. And the assessments, as the solicitor pointed out, will be based on debt service on the bonds issued to finance the improvements, which will include monies to pay for the cost of construction, interest during the period of construction, administrative overhead, cost of issuance. So the actual rate will not be set until we actually sell bonds, because we might have action by the NIDMA board authorizing assessment at a not to exceed amount, but then we'll adjust it downwards to reflect the actual pricing. And the assessments will be limited solely to the amount needed to cover the costs, which are all detailed in the NID plan.
And what's in the plan, as indicated, is just an estimator to give the board some idea of the assessment.
Mr. Luttinger, I believe you're going to probably be able to answer these questions more easily than the board, so do you mind if I address you when I ask the questions?
Okay with the board.
Okay. Who are the board members that are on the nonprofit organization?
Those people have not been selected yet. I created the nonprofit corporation. as you know, the statute gives you an option. You can either use a municipal authority or a nonprofit corporation. I decided to use a nonprofit corporation simply because it's easier and quicker to create one than it is a municipal authority with whom I work on a regular basis. There are draft bylaws in the NID plan which provide that the Board of Supervisors will be able to designate a representative to the NIDMA board. The issue of the bonds, which we're contemplating to be the Chester County Industrial Development Authority, will have a designee on the board, although they have not approved this yet because they're waiting for the NID to be created. And then the residents in the development will have the balance of the board members, which will include the developer and the property owners. The final bylaws will be approved by the initial board. After the board takes action here, they'll designate someone to represent it. After the IDA takes action, they'll appoint someone to represent the IDA. And then the developers and the existing property owners will appoint their designees. And we'll have a 5-person board that will then begin operations of the NIDMA.
Question number 4 was, why did the supervisors elect a nonprofit corporation instead of creating the municipal authority? And Mr. Lettinger just made that clear. That was not something the board decided to do. It was the decision of the developers bond council. Okay. Would it be a fair statement to say if the board created a municipal authority to oversee the NID, that the township would have more control over the NID versus oversight by a nonprofit organization?
Well, maybe I can speak some to that if I may. The direction of the board going back in time was to not be involved in this to the greatest extent feasible. In other words, this is something that's created by statute, and it's regulated and organized and administered by a separate nonprofit corporation. So I think the municipal authority would create, it doesn't really create more involvement in the township because the municipal authority is a separate entity which is created under a state statute, and the township does not control the municipal authority except to the extent that it appoints the members of the board of the municipal authority. But, so it's not really a correct statement to say the board would have more control, but for they would have the authority to appoint the board members. And of course, under the proposed management association, the board of supervisors does appoint 2 members to the association.
So there's one sure way to be able to not be involved in a management association, and that is not to vote to approve this ordinance. Correct?
Well,
Marquette, the way I see it, by statute, because this is West Goshen territory, we have to vote on an ordinance to enable the developer and the owner to create this NID.
But we're under no obligation.
Absolutely not. The benefit that we get, and the benefit that they get, is the fact that they'll have funding available mandated by the statute, that they have to create the infrastructure improvements as part of the plan. There are like 88 pages of conditions. And we would get that within, by statute, I believe, 36 months. But the goal is to get it in by 18 months. Is that not correct, Mr. President?
That's correct.
Okay. So normally, my understanding is a project of this magnitude, we're talking hundreds of homes. You just don't build all the homes like that. You build them 100 at a time here, 100 at a time there. It takes a long time, and the traffic improvements come piecemeal. So what you can have is 200 homes without traffic improvements, congestion, problems, that sort of thing. That's not going to be the case here. What we're going to have is, we're going to have that, for me, one of the big sellers is that road that crosses Route 100 to Phoenix Hill Pike to alleviate some of the traffic that this impending project is going to have. That's something that we get up front rather than piecemeal going down the road. And the only reason why we have to sign the ordinance is it's required by statute that we allow it because this is our territory. We can't just let anybody come in and form these things on their own. Now, they could go about it the normal way, but in my opinion, that's not going to be as beneficial as this way. That's the long and short of it. So there's no obligation for us financially, but the statute does require that one board member has to sit on this authority or corporation, nonprofit corporation. We've seen in the past some confusion with sewer authority and West Goshen and what's going on, who's autonomous, who's not. I think in this situation, it makes it even clearer. We really don't have any control. This is a private venture, but we must allow it or not allow it on our territories. That's what that vote is, this vote today.
Okay, so just to confirm, you said this is a private venture, from your understanding?
Well, sure. I mean, the developers could, develop private. They're going to develop privately, raising their money one way or the other. This is a way for them to raise money to be able to put these traffic improvements and enhancements first.
It's my understanding, though, all those requirements already exist within the approved development plan that was approved December of 2016. Those requirements already exist, whether this NIDMA is created or not.
True, but it's my understanding that the timing is, so they're on the hook for all of that. But my understanding is that we're not going to see all of that within 18 months, unless we do this NID.
Okay, so was the township petitioned to create this NID? I guess the heart of it, what I want to know is whose idea was it? Who pitched this to who? Did our bond council pitch it to their bond council?
And the developer, we proposed this to the township. It was the developer who initiated the idea. We approached Mr. Lalonde, met with certain board members, administrative personnel, had a couple of meetings, discussed it with the solicitor over the course of a couple of months before we introduced formally the concept and had the public hearing and prepared the plan.
Does that mean that the developer submitted the application to the Chester County Industrial Development Authority for the bond?
The township is not financing this project. Under the statute, the NID statute, the township is authorized to issue bonds to finance the project. At the request of the township, we have minimized the township's involvement. We are not asking the township to issue bonds because even if the township were to issue bonds, it can be structured in such a way that their revenues would not be pledged. It would just be the assessments. But we've decided and chosen a path to insulate the township, to have no involvement in the financing whatsoever. And so, yes, it was the developer, I myself, who submitted an application to the Chester County IDA to finance the project. Again, the township is not involved in financing this. They are simply will receive the assets after they're constructed.
Are you aware if there are any outstanding legal judgments against the developer?
I'm not aware of any outstanding legal judgments
Against the developer and any of the firms or general partnerships that he has held in the past? Specifically, I'm concerned about the article I've read about the $20 million judgment against Applecross, and he was the same developer that is now developing this.
And this is where things get dangerous, and I'm not going to go too far down this route, but please check your facts on that. Research Land Development was not the developer of Applecross. Pulte Homes was the developer of Applecross. Mr. Reeser at one time worked for Pulte Homes decades ago, but this developer before this township was not involved. This development company was not involved in the Applecross development.
I've just looked at the Pennsylvania Secretary of State website, and you're able to see, who are the general partners of Pulte Homes of Delaware and Pulte Homes of PA, and it's the same gentleman.
No, he was never a general partner of Pulte Homes.
Okay, all right, thank you for confirming that. How would you respond to the statement that we cannot create a neighborhood improvement district if a neighborhood doesn't already currently exist? How do you create something out of nothing?
There's a Pennsylvania statute that authorizes the creation of a neighborhood improvement district. We're complying with the statute to create a district as a vehicle to help finance the project, which is why the Pennsylvania legislature created this statute.
Board and staff informs me that this development was approved by the township in December of 2016. However, when I went to talk with the planning department of Chester County, they corrected my statement when I said, well, it's already been finally approved, by saying the plan has not been recorded with the recorder of deeds, so it has not been finally approved. So I'm confused as to what constitutes a final subdivision plan.
I can answer that, or Mr. Reston can answer that.
Well, the plan did receive final approval from the Board of Supervisors, subject to some conditions, one of which is that before the plan can be recorded, the applicant has to provide financial security to the township and enter into certain agreements with the township. And frankly, I think that's what led to the idea we see tonight, that it's a vehicle for providing financial security and assurance to the township that the improvements will be complete. So the plan hasn't been recorded because the financial security hasn't been posted and the developer's agreement hasn't been signed.
I'm getting off track here a little bit, but the next agenda item is for a final subdivision plan for a 3-lot subdivision on the same property. So which plan is going to be recorded with the recorder of deeds? The plan with 598 houses, or the plan that is just 3 lots?
They both will be recorded, but not at the same time. The first plan that will be recorded is the 3-lot subdivision plan that the board is going to hear about after this agenda item. That plan contains no building lots. It allows for the sale of no lots because there are no lots. It simply divides the large Greystone property into 3 separate parcels. As I explained to the planning commission with you in attendance last week, the reason for that is to allow the developer to purchase portions of Greystone in pods, so to speak. And in this case, there's 3 different lots being created. So when he wants to sell a lot, when he wants to go ahead and sell a house, then he has to record the land development plan, which got approval back in December of 2016. But my guess is that recordation will probably come sometime this summer, maybe later this summer, maybe early fall. This is a guess at this stage.
The NID Act allows for a NIDMA to sell lots.
The NIDMA cannot sell lots.
NIDMA doesn't own anything.
The NIDMA can assess lots, but it cannot sell anything. It doesn't own it.
All right, I think I have that written somewhere. I have the act somewhere, I believe. I'll find that later and confirm it. So the Chester County Planning Commission also gave me a checklist of what is needed for recording a subdivision or land development plan. And the last thing that you need to check the box is plans are recorded at the Recorder of Deeds office within 90 days of the date approved by municipality. I I've been told that unless you have a written extension, that plan that was approved by the board in December of 2016 would have expired if it wasn't recorded. Am I missing something?
That's incorrect.
Okay.
The recording period is extended for the time period that the developer is trying to comply with the conditions. So those conditions have not been satisfied, so that 90-day clock has been extended and has not expired. Additionally, frankly, it's routine for subdivision plans and land development plans to be recorded after that 90-day clock expires.
Yeah,
Happens all the time.
Okay. I'm just looking at a letter from Mr. Lalonde that was recorded with Chester County Recorder of Deeds regarding Westchester School District, Fern Hill Elementary.
That's exactly right. That Recorder of Deeds requires that they receive written authorization from the township to record a plan that goes beyond 90 days from the date the plan was approved.
Okay, was that done in this case?
No, because the plan hasn't been presented for recording yet.
Okay. Late this afternoon, I did receive a copy of the 88 pages of the management agreement that is between the township and the NIDMA. Is that the same? Yeah, the NID plan. Okay. Obviously didn't have time to read through it, but a few things really jumped out at me and concerned me. We're being told that this is not going to cost the residents any additional fees or costs, but it says page 10, I don't know if that's the first page 10, there's different sections. However, bonds are projected to be issued by the authority to finance a portion of the public improvements described above. Why does it say it's only going to finance a portion of the costs?
Because the developer is obligated to create and finance these public improvements. So anything that's not financed with bond proceeds will be financed by the developer.
And it goes on to say bond proceeds will cover a portion of the cost of constructing the improvements. So we're being sold that it's to cover all the costs of all the construction and all the improvements. But this agreement just says it's just going to cover a portion of them.
Well, you can be assured that the township will not be responsible for paying for any of these improvements.
I believe that, like page 86, it's page is numbered 6, but I believe it's the second or third to the last page of the agreement. Third-party beneficiaries. The parties hereto intend that the parcel owners and the developer will be third-party beneficiaries of this agreement, and that the parcel owners and the developer will have the right to enforce the provisions of this agreement against the township. And that seems contrary to what you're telling the residents, that we're under no risk in forming this.
The management agreement lays out the responsibilities of the management association vis-a-vis the township. Under the Municipal Claims Act, only the township is permitted to file claims on delinquent, to foreclose on property for failure to pay the assessments. So the township will be involved to the minimal extent needed. And as a result, there are standard provisions that require the parties to honor their obligations. It does not involve incurring any expenses. Any costs incurred by the township in enforcing claims will be reimbursed by the NIDMA through the assessments. So there will be no exposure to the township.
I'm not sure I have it in my paperwork here, but I do recall reading that the NIDMA has the authority to assess the township for any cost that the NIDMA incurs.
That's incorrect. The NIDMA has agreed to reimburse the township for any administrative costs it incurs in connection with the NID, so that they will be reimbursed with bond proceeds in the first instance for costs incurred to date, and on an ongoing basis, to the extent that the township incurs costs with respect to the NID, those will be included as administrative costs of operating the NID and will be factored into any assessments that are imposed on the property owners.
Who incurs the cost of filing the liens against any homeowners that don't pay the assessments? Because I know that nonprofit corporations cannot file liens, so the township would be
That's what I
responsible.
referred to, so that's why we'll be working with the township, and we've been coordinating with the local tax collectors to establish the procedures to do this in the most efficient basis, and all costs will be reimbursed by the NIDMA out of the assessments. So the property owners will be paying all of these costs. The township will have no exposure.
Is it a correct statement to say there's just one property owner in this development?
Right now.
Well,
And how many-
one of the properties, most of the properties are owned by a partnership. I think that one of the properties is owned by individuals. They're all the same family.
I looked back at the September meeting where I believe you first presented this, just to refresh my memory, because I wasn't interested in it at that time. There were other issues that I was interested in. And it was made clear that the family that's developing the property would be paying assessments because they would be benefiting from the improvements. However, that has changed. And in the current plan, they are carved out and will not be paying the assessments.
The manor house is carved out. The family owns right now 450 other acres, which will be assessed. And as quickly as they sell those homes, the homeowners will pick up that portion of that assessment as Mr. Estes said. But the 25 acre, I think we call it the manor house, the Greystone Manor, which is not part of the subdivision. It's going to stay as Greystone Manor, at least hopefully for the foreseeable future.
It's not part of
the district.
Right. Which I don't think is fair, but, you know, that's the decision. So they've elected to not be a part of the NID. So in effect, I interpret that as that's an objection by them to participate in.
Well, remember what I said. I mean, they've elected, to the extent that manor house is what, 25 acres, the rest of the property that the Jurahians own is subject to the NID, to the assessment. So I don't think it's an accurate statement that they've opted out.
Well,
they're in with both feet, both arms, and maybe out with one
but
finger.
it's the potential homeowners once once the residents, and oftentimes they're going to be first-time homeowners and home buyers that might go into this kind of blindly. But so the assessments aren't scheduled to be collected until 3 years, according to some of the financial information in the agreement.
We will be capitalizing interest and certain administrative expenses during the first 3 years, period of construction, and usually a year after. At that point, the assessments will come online. And if the parcels have not been sold by the Jurahian family, they will be paying those assessments. Yeah, that's exactly how it will work. And they are, Dean, do you want to make a comment about his nervousness about being subject to these assessments? Because he will be paying if in fact the project doesn't proceed. Once we issue bonds and incur the costs.
Well, my understanding of what happened at the Applecross development is what concerns me with this development is if a home builder comes in and is interested in buying up 100 of those lots to build and then sell, once he realizes, the home builder, that is, that included in the deed to buy the home is this mandate or this requirement to pay the assessment fee that that home builder might pull out and say, I'm not comfortable, because then that home builder owns those 100 acres or, you know, the land. So, you know, how can we be assured that home builders are going to want to buy these lots with the stipulation that all the home buyers are going to be required to pay probably 4 or 5 times what their property tax for the township is going to be?
Well, it's more, obviously, there's a huge element of risk for the property owner and the developer. If they don't, you've just heard of the consequence if they can't find home builders to build those lots and sell those houses. But that's a risk that the owner of the property and the developer have decided to incur.
And this has also been fully disclosed, and is fully disclosed to any potential purchasers of real estate. We have extensive disclosure information on the need and the assessment process and the potential exposure. So everybody will be going into this with their eyes wide open, with full documentation, so that nobody should be surprised. And most of these homes are also, they're not $150,000 homes. They're high scale, upper scale, expensive homes for people who will be able to afford to pay the assessment. Otherwise, they won't buy them.
It's my understanding a variety of homes. Some will be townhomes, some will be.
Right. Correct. Different prices.
So they will be expensive, so they're not getting a break, as I'm understanding that if you're included in a neighborhood improvement district, you should pay lower for your home because those costs were paid for somewhere else.
That's what the market demands.
If somebody doesn't want to pay the assessment, I hope they won't live here. They don't want to.
Well, yeah, I know I'm going to have to sit down and take a break here for a second, but I have other concerns. But the issue of full disclosure is what concerns me, because I've heard the argument of it's buyer beware. And right now, this board, you're the buyers. And, well, if they don't vote to approve it, it doesn't pass. But you're being sold what the developers, attorneys.
That's just not accurate.
It's
No.
not accurate. If the board approves it, they have no exposure, no liability.
Mark, I understand your concerns. Nobody wants to see a plan going forward that might not succeed. But the risks for the township are minimal, in my opinion, and that's why I'm comfortable to proceed with this. But I just want you to understand that when we say we're being sold something, there's really no transaction going on here. It's just whether or not we're agreeing to let these folks give this shot at a niche. And those folks that are coming in to buy these high-scale houses, it's going to be a buyer beware situation. They've promised to have disclosure. I guess they would face any legal ramifications if they didn't. There's really no, I just can't see any pitfalls, and I've gone over this. I mean, to me, I know, for a lot of folks listening to this, you're kind of like, what's the catch? You know, what's the catch? And I mean, I just don't see it for one, and I appreciate your questions because it's only making me feel better. You're vetting it even more, and we're getting continuals on the record. We got a court reporter here. This is a very good court reporter. Many cases. And I'll tell you, if you speak out of lunch, he will tell you to be quiet. Just don't hesitate to do that. But, you know, I appreciate the questions, Ernie, but once again, I don't think we're being sold anything. I think this is just a vehicle of getting this project going, and the only reason why they need us is because this is West Goshen territory. It's under our jurisdiction. We have to okay it. We have to just say, yeah, we'll allow you to build this in. But the township itself loses no authority over this. So
I would just respectfully request that unless you've read all 88 pages of this agreement and you truly know what you're voting on, that you not vote on it, because that's exactly what the home buyers are going to be doing. They're going to be dealing with loan applications and trying to get a mortgage and homeowner documents and an 88-page this. They're not going to read it. And then they're going to come to this board in a matter of years soon after, just like I did. Before I ever got involved with the stormwater issue, I was here a year before that. It's a 12-unit complex on 6 acres. It's the 5th new home I've purchased. I've dealt with builders, I've dealt with developers, I've dealt with homeowner associations. I'm aware of the issues that arise, and I'm just here to ask you, because when I, as a home buyer, sign that line, I trusted that the government officials and the professional staff thoroughly vetted the plans and an 88-page document. Because certainly, unfortunately, a lot of us still out there want to trust our elected officials and our government employees to do the right thing. And if you haven't read the 88 pages, I just ask that you continue this agenda item until next month, when you can vote for certain that there's no obligation and there's no risk to the township current residents and the future residents. Thank you.
Dr. White?
Hello, I'm Douglas White, West Goshen Township. Before you vote on this, I was listening to Margie. She made some good points. The developer is asking the township for basically a favor to get this going. The way my dad did things would be, he would listen, and he would say, well, what am I going to get? And so what I would urge the board, before you vote on this, I would like them to make sure that the developer pays for the sewer expansion on Andrew Drive, and they do this through negotiations to see if there's something more that the township can get by approving this. The township doesn't have to approve it. It seems like a good financing plan, but they're not asking for relief from hardship, as a homeowner would come to the zoning hearing board and ask for a zoning variance. This is just, as I see it, a financial favor. So if the board could do this through negotiations. Thank you.
Well, if I can just respond to that. As Chris said earlier, there is a benefit to our township that can't get lost in this discussion.
Okay.
The benefit to them is that they will get financing at municipal rates. That's a good thing, because that gives them the opportunity to immediately access the capital and start the capital improvements right away. The risk that we face, if we're not helpful in providing this favor, and just in terms of creating an ordinance, is that they then have to make decisions based upon their financing and their availability to financing throughout the entire stages of all the stages of this process. And that may result in us not getting the roads in time. And we're basically hedging a bet that we're going to benefit if there's a problem down the road, because we're going to have most of the things that we need and we want in our township to be improved already completed. And I'm concerned about using the word favor. I think this is
It's a consideration.
It's a consideration, but there's something in it for us too. And for those of us who travel on Phoenixville Pike or Pottstown Pike, we recognize that those are areas that significantly need improvements, and we know we're getting them one way or the other. But in this situation, we're giving them the ability to get them done first, early on in the process.
And Doctor, to that point too, we've already been to that well, and in fairness to the developers and the owners, there is 88 pages of conditions.
Yes.
We've already done it, and your dad did a great job getting some of those conditions.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there was a lot of back and forth there, and that's what we've come up with. So you got to go back to them now and ask them for something else on top of it. I think would kind of be bordering on bad faith, because that plan's already been approved.
Right.
They're coming back to us and saying, we're still working with the same plan that you approved, but we're asking for an and I don't think that changes the plan itself and negotiations that got us over many years to get that plan finally approved. So what's the consideration for the builder of this? I mean, Robin touched on that too, but also you sell homes a lot quicker when you have that full vision of what is to come. So when you're looking at homes and there's only, 50 of them being built, there's no road, there's still construction material all around. Well, instead, you see this road that goes completely to Route 100. It's a visual thing, it helps in sales. So I think it's a benefit too for the builder in that. So once again, I see it as a win-win. Yeah, I am concerned about the buyer beware aspect of it, and I've been assured by the developer, everyone involved, that they're going to take great lengths to make sure that people understand and disclosures what they're getting into. So with that in mind, I think we can proceed. Mr. Casey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, I'll try to be brief.
What's your name?
Tom Casey, West Goshen Township. Regarding the powers of the NIDMA, statute 837, section A, number 5, specifically gives the NIDMA the power to sell and or dispose of real property. So that's a fact. They do have the ability to sell off.
They'd have to own it for, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, the concern I have is, look, if the development goes in, I have no problem with the development, because as soon as my traffic light gets backed up, I'll be standing here in front of you. When Green Hill and Boot Road, that's a concern for the township with this development. No improvements are included, so that will be a consideration for future need. There's already a need for a left turn, but we've had that debate before. The NID is being created, and from that, the NIDMA is being created, but there's nobody there. So we're putting in someone from the development, someone from the board, someone from the financing. And who else is going into that? I might have missed that.
There are 5 members, I believe, and it's the issuer of the bond, the IDA, the township, and property owners, including the developer.
1 is appointed by the IDA, 2 by the township, and 2 by the developer. Initially.
And as the bylaws state, the developer party has to own property in the development. So that if he successfully sells off all the parcels, then the homeowners will be able to select who their representatives are.
So with regards to the NIDMA, once the NID is created, the NIDMA must be then created as well. What powers does the NIDMA have over the township?
Except as was stated earlier, the power to enforce the requirement that liens be filed.
Because looking through this 837 code, there are certain powers that they get. And one of my concerns would be that if we divide this into 3 parcels, and the notion that we can or cannot sell off of these parcels to develop, what's to prevent the NIDMA from deciding to insert a commercial zone within to get rid of the other lots that can't be sold?
They have to stick with the approved plan, from my understanding. If that plan has been approved, they can't go outside the ground.
They can't change it,
But once again, Mr. Purnell.
they can't change it.
Right.
But can they apply for a variance to the zoning to then allow for that if it seems like a hardship?
Now, it's interesting when you pose the question, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the NIDMA weren't there, yes, you probably could, somebody could come in and petition the board for a change of zoning, but with Wall Street involved in the issuance of bonds, You won't be able to change the zoning. They're going to, there's money on the street, so to speak, vested in this particular plan. So actually, the more I think about this, and I didn't think about it until you were raising this, actually put more restrictions on a different use of the property that had not been in place.
So it's
It's
not a main question.
that was a good question. All the questions to make sense, I get it.
The other thing that popped out at me was the question regarding portion of, regarding commitments. If I may ask Ms. Swart what she meant by that. You had mentioned something regarding pay a portion of something.
Portions of the improvements.
If it doesn't pay, that's a sort of a clarification. If it doesn't pay for all of the improvements associated with the job, there's still going to be private financing. Remember, the NIDMA only pertains to the public improvements. So there's other improvements that the developer is going to have to provide his own private financing for.
Is this from, who is this from?
This is undoubtedly from the NID plan itself. And we tend to use portion because there's the possibility, in as much as they haven't bid out all the costs of construction yet, that the bond proceeds will not be sufficient to cover all the costs. As a result, there may be equity provided by the developer to finance completion. And as the developer is obligated in its agreements with the township to provide these improvements, he's obligated to pay for them. And so we'll use bond proceeds to the extent they're available. If they're not sufficient, then the developer will be obligated to make up any shortfalls.
So portion, in law, I'm learning that the wording matters. Specifics matter. So is it possible to say that all, instead of portion of, should be used?
What I would typically say, and I did not draft that document, but what I would have said was all or a portion, which is what an ordinance or resolution would say. And again, it's just to cover all the potential variations that might occur. The developer is obligated to fund and construct these improvements, and we're looking to use bonds to finance that. And to the extent that bonds are not used to finance that, then it does not fit into the cost, it's not included in the cost base on which the assessments are imposed. So that if in fact it's less than all, then the property owners will have a lower assessment as a result.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact, on page 5, under Roman numeral 3, it does in fact say to finance all or a portion of the cost of the public improvements.
Sorry, Mr. Estes, can you say that page?
Yes. It might be a second.
Paragraph 4A.
Yeah, this says by the authority to finance a portion of the costs.
Well, I'm looking at page 5 where the conversation or the indication about proposed public improvements begin. And it says, the purpose of the NID district, the special assessments to be levied in the NID district, and the bonds to be issued with respect to the NID district is to finance all or a portion of the costs of public improvements for the benefit of property in the NID district. These improvements are described in the following page. And then there's a list of all the improvements on the following page, totaling an estimated cost of $23,311,498.
Thank you.
Okay, one other suggestion. If the township needs to consider someone who can be an oversight, I would highly recommend the township consider Ms. Swart to be a part of that.
I have more questions if nobody else does.
I need more paper.
Both the court reporter is changing some of the tape, so we're just going to wait for a couple minutes.
Yeah, that was the November 7th edition, it was advertised as law. Right, exactly. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, as I indicated, I think at the outset, you do have the ordinance before you, and the ordinance has the effect of approving the actual district and approving the district plan that's attached as an exhibit. The exhibit that's attached includes the language all of the portion of.
Mrs. Swart.
Thank you. Included in the improvement costs are the sanitary sewer and pump station costs. And somewhere through my research, I read that since they would technically be owned by the sewer authority, that they cannot be included in the cost of the development because they wouldn't be dedicated to the township. They would be dedicated to a separate authority.
I think it's any
Governmental entity.
governmental entity.
Along that same line, I know when the township went through the approval of the sewer authority bond issuance, the proceeds are it's very specific what those proceeds can be used for. My concern is that the proceeds of this bond issuance may be allowed to be used
But you can be
for...
assured that the issuer of the bonds, whether it's the Chester County Industrial Development Authority or someone else, will make certain that the funds are used in accordance with the issuance.
Not only that, in addition, we'll have offering documents. There'll be an offering that's subject to the securities laws. If there's any material misrepresentation or fraud or omission, there's action that can be taken against the people who put that together, which would be the developer, not the township. Again, the township's not involved in the financing. The bonds will be issued by an authority, whether CCIDA or Bedford, the state authority, and pursuant to a trust indenture, bond indenture, which is an agreement that will detail all the sources and uses, and will have a detailed requisition process that will require approvals from various public officials and consulting engineers to ensure that the plans and specs are satisfied and that the monies are used for appropriate purposes. The developer is not getting his hands on the money. It's going to a corporate trustee. It'll be U.S. Bank, Bank of New York Mellon, a major financial institution will hold the funds and will have express instructions on how those funds be applied. And no money will be released unless it's in accordance with this indenture. And the IDA will certainly make sure that this is satisfied as well.
I'd just like to state for the record, I did send an email to the solicitor's firm of the IDA, who is also a firm that has represented the developer in legal action. And I am concerned that there's a bit of conflict of interest there. I don't need to comment on that, but I just wanted to put that
Well, let me just correct something for the record. That the law firm of Lamb McElwain has not represented this developer. When you say the developer, they haven't represented the proposed developer of this project.
When you say that, are you speaking about the legal formation of, I hate to throw out names, but the developer of this project,
Your email, I'm sorry.
they create a separate entity every time they develop a new subdivision?
Well, I think you indicated in your email that, or at least you asserted that Land Magdalene represented Pulte Homes of Pennsylvania. Pulte Homes of Pennsylvania has nothing to do with this project.
No.
Or Pulte Homes of any state has nothing to do with this project.
Also, Margie, Ms. Schwartz, the statute you're referring to at section 73.51 refers to an attorney operating on both sides of the matter. So the attorney needs to be representing not only the financer or the authority, but also the individuals that are taking out the bonds, and that's not the case here. Am I correct? It sets forth right here in the statute. May not be represented by the same attorney or law firm in matters relating to the authority's loans. In matters relating to loans. So it has absolutely nothing to do, this section has absolutely nothing to do with what your email referred to.
Thank you. And I trust that you're an attorney and I'm not. I'm a layman that's trying my best to
Well,
look out for the other laymen
me
in the township.
People voted for us to make sure we do our due diligence, and we're doing our due
I
diligence.
voted for you to get exactly what I'm getting, which is feedback, which is something I'm not used to. So let's go at it, and I'll walk out of here very pleased and satisfied, whether you vote the way I hope you do or not. But the fact that you're giving me this opportunity is much appreciated. So back to this property. Most of it, almost over 400 acres, have been in a program, Clean and Green agricultural security area. When these individual homes are sold to the home buyer, the developer, the landowner, will be responsible for rollback taxes. And the county tax assessor was kind enough, I didn't ask her to do this, she offered. She printed out the 7-year rollback taxes that will be due upon sale of these lots. And it comes to over $550,000. And I'm just wondering if that fee is going to be rolled into the bond issuance, or that will come out of the developers or landowners' pocketbook.
I believe that's going to be the responsibility of the landowners to pay that. It doesn't matter where they pay it from, they have to pay it, and the tax assessment, they're going to come for them on the Act, under the Act 319.
Okay. Staff has stated that they went to Virginia to observe due diligence. I'm wondering if they wrote a report or what their findings were from that fact-finding mission.
We did take a trip to Virginia to view a 1,600 home bid that was established. State of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia is much more advanced in it than we are here in Pennsylvania. I provided a verbal report to the Board of Supervisors individually upon a return. So no written memorandum in my response to you today was created on our site visit.
Is the board relying on any reports or memorandum from any staff or our legal counsel in your decision that you make tonight?
I'm sorry, Mark, can you say that?
Are you relying on, is Mr. Craig as a staff engineer, or Mr. Lalonde, or our attorney? Are they advising you? Usually they come to you with agenda items and they state, staff is recommending that the board approves this. I'm wondering if any staff members are recommending this for approval.
You asked if anyone's recommending this for
The
approval.
staff.
That's not correct. No one recommends anything to me. or I would assume to any of the other board members. I have questions, I ask the questions, I do additional research. I've got it on Westlaw, LexisNexis. I've done all the background research that I need to know to make the decision. I've reached out to other individuals regarding information and questions that I've had. No one has recommended anything to me.
And you know, Margie, they really can't. Often we might hear from our township manager or something, and I can't advise you on this. I can only tell you the facts. I think it's been accumulation of the gathering of evidence from a lot of the sources that you just said that helped me come to this decision. But nobody's telling me this is our recommendation, we put our seal on it. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So, and that's what we're supposed to do tonight. Yes, Mr. Reed.
Thank you. Over the last 4 or 5 months or more, draft mid-plan, draft ordinance, draft funding agreement, draft budget agreement came across our desk. We reviewed them, the solicitor reviewed them, I reviewed them, we marked them. I've got markups here. There's a lot of back and forth. Township's copied on those, so there's a lot of work involved in getting the documents. And the documents were already in great form. These are very competent professionals. They're really minor comments and questions and markups that we made. The township was aware of all of those, so there has been a lot of involvement by council in the background on this.
I'm trying to find my minutes from the township planning meeting the other night where it says staff is recommending approval of this agenda item.
So the planning commission's recommending approval?
I think Mr. Craig was in attendance.
We're absolutely not. The planning commission has nothing to do with the NID. It was not before
Oh,
the
this
planning
was,
commission.
excuse me, for the next agenda item.
We're not on the next agenda.
Well, I know, but I've been to other townships, other government meetings throughout the last 17 years that I first started going to government meetings. And usually the professional staff who's done the due diligence will state that it's their opinion, or they ask the board to approve a measure. And good, I'll take a few minutes and I'll find the minutes from the other night and show that that's in fact what our staff has done in the past, is they bring something, they put it on the agenda, and it could be concluded that it's because the staff did their homework and they feel that it's worthy to be placed on the agenda for approval. So I guess I'm just stating for the record that this decision is being made without, and that's fine, without the recommendation, unless the township manager or any professional staff, the zoning officer, if anybody wants to say that they think it's a good idea and they endorse it.
That's not, we're not here to endorse anything. We're the professional staff. If the board wants to ask us individually, I'll answer them, but I'm not here to provide my opinion. It's the board of supervisors who makes a decision. We've given them all the data for the last 5 months. We have council, and applicants' council who have given us hundreds of pages of documents for them to review.
Questions that you're asking today, we've asked already. I mean, there were concerns, and we wanted to make sure. And on the record, we have our solicitor saying that he's vetted it. He's not saying, I recommend you do this because it's a legislative thing. We have to do that. He can't do that. But he could say, I've vetted this thing. I feel there's no pitfalls to the township. If you approve this, and we've heard from bond counsel, that's the type of due diligence that we do. They're not an advisory committee to the extent that I think you're talking about. But, and I hear a lot of what you're talking about and your concerns. But it almost seems to me like those concerns would be best addressed by the potential homeowners that, you might want to.
Right, well, as a homeowner, I remember standing out on a, piece of ground that was not graded according to plan and speaking with Mr. Craig about it and frustration. And every situation, people will always say, that's what your board approved. I can't do anything about it. Why did they decide to, do this here or put that there?
Right.
The board approved it. The planning commission only recommends the board approval. So everybody, it's always hands off, and I just hope you understand the enormity of your votes, because
We've talked about that too.
it always comes down. In fact, if there's an issue with the bonds, it's the township budget that is being put forth in the.
No credit, this is not an obligation to the township. No township revenues and financial statements of the township are irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with the township.
What does a bond council put out, though, for?
The township is not issuing any debt. It'll be the IDA, the Industrial Development Authority.
Whose finances are the potential bond buyers relying on?
They're relying solely on the assessments. That's the source of payment and security, the assessments.
So just confirm that our 2016, or last year's audited budget, will not be included in, I can't reach for the terms, and the offering statement. Yes.
No, there would be no financial information, other than there might be some generic demographic information about West Goshen Township, because that, discloses something about potential home buyers. But we're not selling these bonds. There's no involvement by the township. So the township's finances, their financial statements, their debt capacity have nothing to do with this. And that's among the reasons why we want to go to an authority rather than finance it through the township. If we were doing it through a municipal authority, for example, that were created by the township, even though it's a separate governmental unit, the financial information would be reflected in the financial statements of the township. By doing it through the IDA, we're totally insulating the township. It's not going to be reflected anywhere.
That's great, and I must say that makes me feel a whole lot better, because I was under the understanding that our financials would be included in that, because I know the last issuance that the Chester County IDA issued was for $43 million, I believe it was, for Collegium Charter School. And when I looked at that official document, even though the IDA issued the bonds, it was based on and included in that official offering statement was.
I drafted that official statement for Collegium Charter School. I represented the underwriters, PNC Capital Markets, and that was sold on the strength of Collegium's financial statements. There may have been demographic information about Chester County, but it was a revenue bond secured by revenues received by Collegium Charter School, principally from the school district and from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It also had no obligation of the township, the county, or any other governmental unit. It was an obligation of the Industrial Development Authority, payable solely by revenues provided by Collegium Charter School pursuant to a loan agreement between the IDA and Collegium.
Great. Thank you for hearing me.
You're welcome.
I know there's a lot of other questions in here I'm going to wish that I asked. I had them all out. Obviously, I didn't start researching the information until after November, but it's a decision that I know will have long-lasting effects on the township. And unfortunately, I do believe you're going to regret this decision if you vote for it, because you're going to have residents just like me 3, 4, 5 years from now really upset that this was allowed to happen. Not the development, but the creation of the neighborhood improvement district, and the lack of transparency when they bought their home.
And I know, Margie, you're making an assumption.
I am, so. But it's based on experience.
Let's proceed in good faith. I think we have a
Great.
motion.
Thank you, and you are proceeding in good faith because you've allowed me a lot of time, and I certainly appreciate the time offered. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for approval of ordinance number 1-2008.
We have a second.
Needed for ordinance.
I'm sorry.
Who's second?
You need to go again.
Robin made the motion.
No,
No.
You made the motion.
You made the motion.
Thank you.
I
I'm seconding.
Keith Rutherford, second. Okay, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Thanks. Okay, folks, moving on to number 13, discussion of possible approval of a final subdivision plan for 3 lots consolidation for Geranium on the northwest corner of 322 bypass and Phoenixville Pike. Agenda. Ready when you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Utah Greco representing the property owner here. What you see up on the screen is a plan of a 3-lot subdivision that was unanimously recommended for approval by the Planning Commission last week at their meeting. And based on the earlier conversation, the Planning Commission is required to make a recommendation on land development or subdivision plan. So they did that. And essentially what this is, you've heard it alluded to in the prior presentation, it allows the property to be purchased in phases. You see 3 different, I use the word phase, but 3 different colors up there, each representing a different phase of the development. And that the lot lines of that 3-lot subdivision, we've overlaid them against the land development plan lot lines. So you can see how they match the approved land development plan. I don't know that it's any more complicated than that. There is no land development being proposed with this subdivision. There's no land development being approved with this subdivision. It's simply recordation of a 3-lot subdivision.
And it's actually a lot consolidation plan. There are existing 13 parcels presently. This consolidates those 13 parcels into 3 parcels, which, as Mr. Calabretto stated, allows them to be distributed for project. And the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend the project for approval.
One of the questions I had to do with parcel 52375, which is the lower corner there, by 322 and Phoenixville Pike. That's it. That area was part of the Serpentine Barrens, as was the adjoining L-shaped property 185.
Right, this whole area is.
I might suggest that that's going to be parkland.
It is part of the park.
Okay.
On the greater subdivision plan, when that gets recorded.
I was going to say, you're going to tell me how it would be handled subsequently.
Yeah, these 3 lots are just being used to convey ground between the family and the developer, that's all. So the developer will purchase the white area first in the middle. But when the major subdivision gets recorded, the 598 lot plan, the open space will also be created, and that Serpentine Barrens will sit in that open space.
Okay, so it's not going to change, it's still going to be protected.
Correct.
Okay, that was my question.
Right, there's no development proposed by this plan.
Okay,
Just parceling out the land.
okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, Chief.
There's an emergency access on 322 to access into the North Hills development. Will that be maintained?
Yes.
Yes.
It's part of the larger subdivision that was approved almost 2 years ago.
Thank you, Chief. Well, I think it's time to ask for a motion.
I'll make it.
I'll second it. Second it, Mary. Any?
You meet once a month. Have 2 meetings a month, and I don't have to ask them these questions. Does the developer currently have buyers for those 3 separate parcels?
The developer is going to buy the white parcel from the family.
And that would probably happen tomorrow, right?
Not necessarily, no. 60 days maybe.
And then the landowner maintains ownership of the purple and the pink for a while until...
Correct.
Okay. Could those areas be rezoned in the future?
I mean,
Probably not, considering the zoning district has certain minimum lot sizes, and I think in this district, the minimum is, how many acres is 300?
Well, in order to do this development, you need 350 acres. Right. In order to take advantage of this development scheme, I forget what we called it.
R3B.
So you need 300. Now, could somebody come in and propose a different development scheme somewhere down the road? I suppose they could, but it's what I said earlier on in response to the NIDMA question. It's going to be tough to do with all that farm money on the street.
But that goes back to the previous agenda item. The 598 plan has never been recorded, so it really doesn't. So this whole plan could change.
And we spent, Lou, you've been involved since day one, before me, 15 years on getting this, the 598 unit plan done. I'd be retired from here before that would happen again, right, Mr. Dragon?
Are you willing to bet your job on that there's not going to come?
That's not my plan.
That there's not going to come another plan?
There's no plan.
There's no plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You guys call me anytime, ask me any question.
Okay. I know I wanted to do that before, but I thought I like you too much, and then I wouldn't want to ask any questions, and I knew there were questions that I deserved answering.
Anytime you ask.
So, but thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Dr. White.
Hi, Douglas White, West Goshen Township. I went to the planning commission meeting, and I think doing this is all right because it's really separating the subdivision plan from the land as it is right now. So I'd approve it.
Thank you, Dr. White. So we have a motion. We have a second motion. All those in favor? Aye. I'm sorry, Casey?
No, I was waiting for the vote.
Okay, well, it's not.
No, motion's made.
Thank you. Okay, number 14, discussion of traffic improvements for various intersections as adopted in the 2018 general fund budget. I believe Chief Gleason might have a handout for supervisors.
Wrong one for you, sir, with the intention of providing.
Derek, make copies?
We can, I can share.
Well, I can share here.
I just need two.
Yeah, Derek.
Basically, I guess, last fall, Mr. Pielli, you approached me about some quote-unquote problem intersections or intersections that draw a lot of concern for enforcement actions from the police department based on either traffic accident issues or citizen complaints or whatever. So my traffic safety sergeant put together this based on the number of activities that we have at each of these intersections throughout the course. And understand that this may change from year to year, but it won't change drastically. So when you proposed traffic improvements, a budget line for traffic improvements, I asked you to sit down and come up with recommendations for the intersections that you had originally asked for. And these are just a cursory of what he would suggest might be a stepping stone to improving a particular intersection. And they range depending on their location, the volume of traffic, etc. So I give you this with the top 20, I believe it was, traffic intersections. And of course, you know, as years go, we can change, we can add, whatever you want. But what I would propose, and I reached out, I took the liberty of reaching out to Mr. Craig and Mr. Woodward today to possibly put a small committee together with respect to the traffic safety sergeant, myself, Mr. Craig and Mr. Woodward, because he knows the regulations, Mr. Craig knows the regulations regarding what we're allowed to do with regard to stop signs and postings. Mr. Woodward will be doing the work. So I think that would be a good approach to possibly doing this as a stepping stone kind of process. And again, these are general costs. These are just approximates. There's no validity, no hard numbers to this. So that is subject to change. And of course, you know, the less we spend, the more we can do. So that's just it in a nutshell. And on Second to the last page, there were some illuminated stop sign samples, and most of the stop sign posts, I believe, are already reflected taping. But that's probably one of the easiest things that we could do, and the cheapest thing that we could do. The other thing is possibly at one intersection or two, maybe putting a stop sign in on the opposite side of the intersection. So depending on your approach, that sign may be first visible to you before the right-hand side. So there's a lot of things, but I think that it's a work in progress, and I think if we sit down with a collective group, I think we can get some things started.
It sounds like we might, I like the idea of just setting a committee so we can look into the cost, definitely having Rick say on what's allowed, what's not allowed, as far as the improvements at that location. Who would you recommend? I mean, I know Dave, we're on board with that, Rick and Sergeant Greiser, I suppose.
This was your idea, sir. I would recommend that maybe you join the party here and sit down and.
Sounds like a plan. Should we make a motion on that? Okay, so I make a motion to form a traffic improvement committee and ask for a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And folks, just to follow up on that, $30,000 was approved in the 2018 budget. So folks want to spend it as wisely as we can. I think the idea of the committee is a very wise decision. Chief, thank you very much for the report. We'll follow up with you on that as soon as possible.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
So once these, we should inform the residents that the traffic committee is being formed and where the improvements are going to be taking place. Either Facebook, right, Chief Gleason?
We will get it out there. Now, again,
Regarding
these
the
are
traffic,
recommendations.
yeah, right, once the
committee will
recommendations
recommend
go through,
specifics to each intersection.
we should inform the
We will put it out there
residents.
on Twitter and Facebook. for you
Twitter,
as well.
Facebook,
Yes,
our website, so that they know what we're doing. That would be great.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Sounds like, I think we have a question here, sir. Yes.
Yeah, just wanted, before anything was set in stone, that there would be public comment on some of these things.
Absolutely.
So whether they were a good idea or not a good idea, or even more would be needed than comes out of the committee. Or perhaps some citizen representation in the committee.
It sounds like a good idea.
Will that document be on the website?
Well, they'll have to come back and make a report to the board. Once that happens, we'll post it, absolutely.
This is a working document,
Yeah.
so I would.
Would you be interested in serving on the committee?
Sure.
Very well then. Okay. Sounds like a strategy.
Yeah. Anyone else in the audience?
Thank you, Mark.
We'll be in touch with date and time.
So cool. Okay, good. We've got 2 citizens. Very well. Okay, moving right along, number 15, discussion of township mailbox replacement policy for snow plowing operations.
Yes.
Hand that over to Mary Lasota.
Well, this was brought to my attention because a resident had called me. And our current policy is, which is very generous, is to allow for the replacement of mailboxes that are destroyed. Residents have a choice of either a white or black mailbox, including the post. What it does not include is the installation of the mailbox. And I didn't think at first I didn't think it was a big deal because we're a do-it-yourself kind of family. But if you think about it, not everyone is do-it-yourself. Not all our residents are do-it-yourself type individuals, or they may not have the ability to do it yourself because they are physically inhibited from doing it themselves, either based on age or, they don't have the means. And also, I was raised to, if you break it, you fix it. And if you break it, part of the breaking is the installation process. So I'm wondering if we should change the policy from not only replacing the mailbox, but also to providing for installation of the mailbox as well. Because not all residents are capable of installing their mailbox. But if we're going to, we can't just select some residents that we're gonna install from and not install for others. It has to be, the policy has to be uniform across the board. And it was also brought to my attention that it's very difficult to find contractors to do this kind of work because it's not financially beneficial for the contractor to come out and install the mailbox. So the residents are having trouble finding individuals to do it. So, and also it will empower our employees to provide a solution for when the accidents do happen, when the plows do hit the mailbox and they destroy the mailbox. The employees are now going to have an additional avenue of saying we can fix this. You know, sometimes just replacing the mailbox is not enough for the residents, they get agitated. So by replacing and installing the mailbox, it empowers the employees to be able to kind of fix the problem.
You're not gonna like my answer.
That's all right. I'm just throwing it out. A resident called me and I
But
said.
West Township doesn't replace the mailbox at all. No.
Some don't, some do.
And my comment is that we're very, very liberal in supplying a new mailbox. In regards to the installation, I wouldn't get involved in that. I really wouldn't. I see liability problems there because you're working on somebody's private property. I'm scared of that, something like that.
I respect your input. I believe that I had asked about what the position is on some townships. Some don't do anything. Some provide replacement. Some also provide replacement and installation. Installation can be done by the township or installation can be done by a contractor. So we're right down the middle of the road. All I'm saying is, all I'm doing is bringing this before the board to vote on it. Should we change the policy? Should we not change it? With the idea that, you know, we did break it. Should we fix it? Fixing it does include installation of it, in my opinion. There are some residents that are not able to have the capability of fixing it because of, you know, whether age or disability or even cost. But we have to apply a uniform policy across the board. We cannot distinguish between one resident over the other. And we do have the means of doing it, and we also have, what, a 25-foot easement? What's the liability? What's the liability if we...
I actually checked with our insurance broker, and he in no means said do not do it. Have township install.
Do not do it?
We assume a liability for something we don't own. We're on private property. We don't enter private property
Okay,
ever.
so we shouldn't be installing?
No.
Okay, all right, well, that answers my question.
His only secondary position would be if the board does decide to do it, have the township contract out, but we're still taking on the liability.
Okay.
Because we've hired them someone to do that. We'd be working in the right of way, and Mr. Esty, you can talk about this as well. Any facilities put in the right of way, if PennDOT damages, if we damage, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, it's usually thrown snow.
It's
Not, we never hit something with a plow, it's never physical contact, it's usually thrown snow that damage them. But our
Which
broker
means
was very clear.
but that means it was flimsy to start with.
Could have been true. That's the last thing people.
May not, you know, I don't know.
Winters
facts.
ago, there was 3 feet of snow. The snow was pretty,
Took
advantage that time.
You know how heavy the snow is on your shovel.
Yeah.
They have 11-foot snow plows pushing 18-foot, half the road.
Yeah.
The amount, the weight of the snow coming off is a mess.
I have pictures hanging out the window while they're plowing. I'll show them to you.
We've actually in-house tried
We've tried mud flaps, we've tried chains, we've tried to
To minimize
that. The problem is then the snow doesn't come off and we're not clearing the streets. And the trucks will eventually stop.
Mary, in your research on this issue, did you come upon like maybe an average price of installation that folks do charge to have it installed?
I did not check into that.
Dave checked, there are 2 townships, I think Chester County, that do install, but they outsource both
Influence
outsource.
I believe Tradifferent was kind of.
They don't use township staff to do it, they outsource to a third party, but they're still ultimately liable because it's a fire contract. So it's getting a little bit stiff. We had a nice long discussion about it, even a temporary, if our crew would make a 5-gallon bucket with concrete with a post just to get through the winter, because we can't dig right now, it's impossible.
Yeah, trying to plan.
We become responsible for what's called, it's 5 pounds of concrete weight, or 5 gallons of concrete weight. If it's made into a projectile, it's a house, and we're liable for the damage from that, so we couldn't find a good way around it.
Yeah, just the liability issue won't kind of scare me. I mean, I could possibly see, but then I would have to see what type of numbers we're talking about. If we would, I don't know what liability we would have if we had some sort of fund where it's, okay, fine, we get you this standard mailbox and here's $50 towards installation or something.
That would be the cleanest way to do it, is to reimburse them a set amount for them to have an installer do it. But, you know, you're not gonna get a handyman for less than $200 to come out.
That's
They're not coming out to clam big old.
The other issue is right now, you know, PennDOT will not replace a mailbox. If a resident on a state road has a mailbox knocked over, we drop them off.
Yeah, inside the township.
And we stock the post, we stock the mailboxes, so you don't have to get out to Home Depot.
Right.
And depending on operations, we try to get them there the next day. You know, in PennDOT.
So that's a courtesy that the township's doing.
Yeah.
Even on
And, you know, we don't plow every street in West Goshen.
Right.
Westtown plows some. So if a resident from Westtown, if one of our residents is on the Westtown route, Westtown won't do anything.
Right.
We provide a box of
Yeah.
post.
No,
So-
it's a great benefit.
Yes, sir.
How often does this happen?
Good question. Depends on the winter.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Well, granted, how
I mean,
often?
the 7 feet we got 3 years ago,
Oh, well, that's, yeah.
average season 50. Dave? Not even?
Yeah, not even.
Yeah,
I've had
25.
maybe 4 so far. I know we have
Oh, and
a
we've had-
big, but we still have,
Tomorrow will be our 5th storm,
Yeah.
6th storm.
yeah, it's not a lot.
And most folks are appreciative that, you know, they can get a box and a post dropped off.
Okay.
Couldn't the township ask the resident to waive all liability
No.
in
No, so we could
if the township did something to
Well, they're,
Oh, for installation.
well, there could be third party. If a motorist leaves the road and hits that mailbox that we installed, we're sued. So that we can't evade
Wow.
any liability, no matter how carefully, because we cannot indemnify everybody in the university drives by someone's house. So you've got
talking about snow
multiple.
removal at that.
I'm sorry?
We were talking about snow removal at that, you know, the consequence to snow removal.
I don't understand.
Oh, you
We're
were
talking about
someone
liability
else getting
installing.
the mailbox.
So if we install the mailbox, we're
Right.
liable for the mailbox.
Yeah,
If
we can't
someone,
evade.
if you're saying if someone hits the
If a
mailbox.
passing motorist hits on the mailbox that we installed on private property and they find out we installed it, we'll be named in a suit if their car was destroyed or they got hurt. If we can't evade liability, no matter what.
I think the point is it goes beyond snow.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be named in the suit, whether we're ultimately, we
Yeah,
have.
I mean, it'll cost us $5,000 to get out of it, so yeah.
So that's why we haven't done the installation.
Right.
Can I
Because
just
it's
ask,
done so little.
how is it if a mailbox is installed properly by federal guidelines, how is it this township would assume liability if the motorist goes off the right-of-way onto a private property?
All the mailboxes are in the right of way. Our right of ways are 50 feet.
Technically, once you install the box, it's owned by the post office. We don't own it, which we found out during the campaign. So we don't own it.
Oh.
You don't own it. So there is no
Well, no,
liability.
we're not saying we own it. We would still be named in a suit.
Right,
So
but
it's
the
not
point is,
structured right.
if the homeowner installs it, then we're not taking, we're not participating in it.
It's the
Here's-
deepest pocket.
here's an obstacle.
Mr. Casey, it's the deepest
Here's an
pockets.
option. They make mailboxes that do not have to be installed with concrete. They're simple spike, 24 inches, that can be hammered in by the average homeowner.
Not in the wintertime with this permafrost day.
There's 6-8 inches of frost.
Yeah, we have that much frost, so.
But, you know what I propose, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of questions down here, but as it stands now, I mean, perhaps maybe we should table this and look into, I think the cleanest way would be if you're really concerned about the cost for something, for example, there's some senior citizens out there that are on a fixed budget, and their mailbox goes down, and we give them a mailbox. How's that person going to be able to install it? And maybe we should look at what the cost might be and kind of come up with
For installation.
a fee.
A fee to
Yeah.
reimburse them.
Another, the other concern that the board, I just want to point out, the other concern that the board should consider is when you create such an all-encompassing thing, it must encompass all the citizens.
Well, that's what we're
And
saying, you
the
can't
problem-
discriminate.
The problem that you face is not all citizens have post boxes at the curb. Some of them have them at the front door.
Sure.
So if we can't include those into this, whatever you want to call it, can we do it? That's the other concern.
First you have to have a crime.
Oh,
Or
that's
sorry,
not a crime,
sorry,
it's
an
damage.
incident.
Damage.
Sorry.
We have to have an incident.
Thank you. I'm correcting myself. I appreciate your help. So we're talking about damaging their property. So
Right.
as we're taking our plow up to their mailbox, we're not in the business of replacing it just for goodwill. It's when it's.
Right, but technically it's an act of God. Let's just be
No,
clear.
it's not.
The snow.
The snow is an act of God.
If
Hitting
it
it-
said, look,
All right.
honestly, he said it, if the plow itself hits it, that's different. This is snow coming off, which technically is an act of God. It's like a branch falling in your car.
We already have a
You know,
policy in place
so-
that permits us to provide a mailbox and a post for the homeowner. I think we need to take into consideration whether we would consider offering them some kind of compensation for the installation offset.
And we're talking about liability and deep pockets. And if the township destroys the mailbox, couldn't they be sued?
No.
Why not?
It's in the right of way. We can destroy anything in the right of way. We've
You
hit
can
cars.
destroy it, but you
Hold
can't
on, we've
recreate
hit
it.
cars with our plows. We have sovereign immunity
That's
because
why-
it's happening within the right of way.
That's
We
one of
can
the
hit
reasons.
cars and not have any liability.
intentionally.
No. No, if it's malicious and on purpose.
Then we come back to the crime.
Clear. To be clear, it's the accident.
Go back to the next one.
Foreshadowing.
Yes.
Keep on people.
Can we change the conversation or be driving?
Table it, we'll get an idea of what the installation costs.
So let's table this item, let's move forward. It says table it for 6 months.
No, that's after winter. After winter's over. We'll talk about the summer.
Okay, so item number 16, discussion of employee appreciation awards. You know, I'm not going to table it, I'm just going to speak briefly about it. This is an initiative that I'd like to share with my fellow township supervisors regarding some employee appreciation awards. We've got employees that have been working for the township for, no exaggeration, 4 decades. There's nothing in place right now to honor their service, to, give them a special day. So that's something that I'd like to look into. I'm going to gather up some more details. I'm going to be working with Casey to find out as far as, how many employees we have over the 10-year anniversary or 20-year, whatever. And we figure every quarter that we would have an employee appreciation event of some type in conjunction with the township supervisor meeting and perhaps some small honorarium type gift for their service.
I think that's a great idea, just make sure that it falls in under the new tax code.
An update on that. There's no, under the old tax law, there was a de minimis amount, usually $50.
Right.
Our sick day thing,
Yeah.
that's gone. Everything's got to go through payroll now. So even if you offer them $50, now it's worth $46.95 or whatever. The tax, that's got to go through payroll now because there's no de minimis amount anymore. It's under the new tax law.
Class tax, right. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. Absolutely.
So, and other things would be quarterly employee of the month, and we're also, I'd like to initiate quarterly staff meetings, but that's more of an in-house sort of thing.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be a policy. So, it's getting a little late, so I'm going to table the rest of this, but I will get back to Casey and work on this, and we can present this later on, when we're finished product. Okay, any questions on that?
How about we give the winner a new mailbox?
Only if you're a resident, I have a couple of those.
That's good.
Make sure it's in the minutes.
All right. Number 17, discussion and possible approval of Township Finance Department policies, specifically purchase orders and accounts payable policy and cash disbursement policy.
I would like to start the discussion.
Very well, sir.
As a CPA and having done the audits and so forth, I would suggest that we run this by our auditors specifically for information. And I already have made several notes that are changes or suggested changes to it.
Okay.
Minor modifications. But I think in general, it's absolutely a great idea. And it's absolutely, but it needs a little bit of tweak.
We'll tweak it, yeah.
Great.
Excellent idea.
Okay, well,
And I'll be glad to help.
all right.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, Mr. Purnell. I'm going to defer to your expertise on that, suggest that we table it, further revisions. Finally, number 18 on the agenda. Any other business to come before the board? Mr. Casey.
I just have one request. Do I have the board's permission, and you don't have to answer it right now, to engage with Ms. Testa regarding the risk assessment initiative? And you may, I'm not sure, if she's employed by the township, and if so, that may have to be evaluated before I can speak directly to her. So I'd like to know to make that happen.
Okay, well, Tom, just to be specific, the risk analysis, you're talking about what was proposed at that meeting that Senator Denman called last Thursday?
Correct.
Okay. And
Yes, and we're trying to put together to deal with all of the emergency management from varying townships to try to, we're also dealing with the county, and basically we have 3 essential questions that has to do with life, property, and environment. And then there's subsets of that. So we're trying to understand what emergency management personnel in specific regions and in the county are looking for. Some of them have seen Sunoco's report. They're unable to speak about it. They weren't, from what my understanding is it was very brief of a viewing, and they have some questions as well. So I want to know, and you don't have to answer me tonight, they have to look into it due to the fact that she is a West Goshen employee. So, and somebody can get back to me.
Okay, well, we're taking under advisement, because just wanted to pass it by legal.
Yeah, we should check with our solicitor, our
Yeah,
special
and,
counsel.
I don't necessarily see a problem with it, but just give us a chance to make sure we.
Yeah, sooner than later would be great, because we're trying to do this very quickly.
What might be helpful is if you could describe the scope of work or the scope of discussions that you might have.
Yeah, present the question.
And that way we can
We're
evaluate them
working
in
on
terms.
putting that together, but part of the goal is to make this risk assessment not only, it's to make it a generic, broad-based risk assessment for all infrastructure buildup. And what we're looking at is not one specific thing. It's a matter of, because we have different pipe material, we have different pressure, we have different materials running through those pipes, we have different impacts regarding where it's located within the township. We also have zoning issues that are coming for planning as we saw tonight. So what's the impact to a development like that if you know, somebody decides they want to run a pipe through it? So, you know, what are we talking about? And emergency management personnel are the ones who have to deal with the aftermath. So they have questions as well. We're learning that, I'm learning that they don't know everything about all of this yet, and it's becoming obvious that state legislators, both sides of the aisle, and senators and representatives are now almost en masse coming forward with letters of looking for this. So that's what we're working towards. So I just wanted to know if I could speak with her, but I need your permission to. You guys are unique with regards to me having to ask that question. So, but if somebody can get back to me in the next day or two, I appreciate it.
I think to Robin's point, it might be a good idea if you formulate some of the questions or the information that you would want, so we can know that.
Well, to be
You can
honest,
set the boundaries if necessary, if there are any boundaries that council would recommend or.
I would suggest if it happens that the boundaries are set in advance, to make it more of an efficient process, that we could ask questions and she can simply say, I can tell you where I can, and we move forward. It's easier that way because we're not out trying to outthink her. We're trying to learn from her. So we're trying to make this a very smooth process, and so as long as she knows what she is entitled to say and not say, just like the county level people know, then that makes the job easier. So the outline for us to determine what we think she might want to know, as opposed to what she actually knows or doesn't know, is, you know, I think it's counterproductive for us to assume
You'd like
questions.
us to assume that she might be asked questions and we need to figure out which questions she should be asked.
Well,
in general.
like I said, I mean, this study, and the hope is to make it a generic study that can be used by any municipality across the county, across the state, so that they can simply plug information in and out depending on where they are. And so anyways, I don't even know if I need to talk to her. I just need to know if I can. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Doctor?
Doug White. I had sent a letter to all the board members with two special requests. I want to make sure everybody got the letter. So maybe at a future time we can discuss that. And I would honor the decision, whatever decision the board makes, respect the decision. Thank you.
I didn't think I had anything, but with Tom asking about Andrea, it reminded me, I received an email from the treasurer of our homeowners association this morning, and he stated West Goshen board meeting, February 20th, fire hydrant bill. Margie, is this item too small for the board? If you don't think so, can you get us on the agenda for February 20th, if that date works for you? We could go tonight, but the agenda looks pretty full. Thanks, Dan. He's been the treasurer of our homeowners association for the existence. He's a developer, and he's really, I know I've mentioned it numerous times, but because I know my whole community is concerned about that. So I'm wondering if Ms. Testa might be able to find out the number of the hydrants in the township that the township doesn't pay for, and make sure that it's not an arbitrary and capricious decision of who is having to pay for fire hydrants and who's not. So maybe next, well, right, so maybe next month, could we ask Ms. Testa to find out how many private fire hydrants are being paid for, and if it's, like you said, across the board, are we equalizing this out?
We don't pay for any private hydrants. It's by code. Mr. Craig? discussed.
What code, do we have a written policy though that states?
It's in the township code, we don't need a separate policy, it's in.
Well, there's a lot of things in the township code though that we don't really follow. And but we pick and choose kind of.
Let me ask you this, Margie, you want a number, how about this? Do you want Andre to look at the number of private wells in the township and the number of not private wells?
Well, no, see, we're getting charged a commercial rate and we're a residential neighborhood.
Right.
So, we shouldn't be being charged for a commercial rate at $55 a month when all residents pay, the rate that the township pays for residential is 22 or 25, depending on
But that's through
issue.
Aqua, right? Aqua's charging you.
Yeah.
Aqua's charging you a commercial rate.
Yeah, my suggestion is appeal that to Aqua and then subsequently to the PUC.
The public utility
Because they
commission
set the rates.
has jurisdiction.
That's where you go.
Absolutely. And we don't set the rates.
Yeah, but I hate to, I always feel like I'm arguing and I don't like to argue, but it,
Not arguing.
So-
It's telling you what to do.
so
I can help you with the PUC stuff.
there is a code that says the township may charge for fire hydrants. But there isn't a township
We don't do
written policy determining what fire hydrants you pay for and which ones you don't.
There is a second-class township code provision in this state code that allows the board to set up a special fire tax district that anybody with public hydrants, we can assess a special tax. We don't do that. We've never done that here.
Well, that's a good idea.
I couldn't agree. We should look into it to help pay for
Thanks
fire.
for bringing
There you go.
that up.
Ms. Tessa, would you mind finding out how many?
I'm not sure I can find that information out. That's an awful.
Yeah, we can contact Mike Feely at Aqua and get those numbers for you.
Okay, would you do that? That would be great. Thank you very much. But I expect, I know this man and I know he will come and he's going to plead his case and do a much better job of it than I do.
But
So-
you're talking about a private fire hydrant, correct? This
No,
is your
this
private
is the
fire
health,
hydrant.
safety, and welfare of the residents of this
No, but
township.
you're talking-
But it's, the township, that fire hydrant isn't there for my benefit.
But
It is
it's-
there for the benefit of our safety
But it's
professionals
private-
that need to use that.
It's a private
It's not
fire
for,
hydrant.
it's not for me, it's
It
for
is-
our
it is-
safety
Margie, it is
professionals.
for you because it reduces your homeowner's insurance. By being within 1,000 feet of that hydrant, it reduces your homeowner's insurance. That's the benefit to you.
Okay.
We don't charge it, so
Yeah, we
I
don't.
go,
It's
But other people's taxes pay for the fire hydrant outside of their door, but the same taxes I pay, I don't get.
Because the township doesn't pay.
Okay. So the 325 homes that will be built in Greystone,
400, I'm sorry.
okay,
500.
will they be, since it's on a private road, will they be paying?
They'll be private hydrants. We don't have any ownership of the road or anything
Okay,
inside there, so those will be private hydrants.
okay.
Owned by the HOA inside that park. Just like yours, your HOA.
Right, so they'll be paying homeowner fees and
Not to the
assessment.
township, not to the township, and the assessment not to the township.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, but he'll be here next week, so it's not going to be a good day. I'll just tell him to come.
He's welcome to come and talk.
All right, great.
Sure.
Motion to adjourn?
I do have a
Oh, sorry.
motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
You? Second?
Second.
Robin?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.